The millionaire invited me and my son just for a laugh. But when I picked up the guitar, the whole room froze, and he went silent. Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late?
Say it in the comments.
Let's tear into today's tale. I used to think life had a rhythm you could rely on. You wake up, go to work, pay your bills, and if you're lucky, you have enough left over for a small treat on weekends. For 15 years, that rhythm
Kept me steady.
I worked at a food processing plant in Dayton, Ohio, punching in at 6 a.m. and heading home exhausted but proud. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours.
Until one
Morning, the plant shut its doors for good. I walked out carrying a cardboard box with everything I had collected over those 15 years, an old coffee mug, a couple photos of Caleb, and a pin they gave me at my 10-year mark that I once wore proudly. That day, I felt like the floor had been ripped from under me. Caleb, my 13-year-old son, didn't cry or panic like I half expected. Instead, he walked straight into the kitchen, took a sip of water, and said, "Mom, we'll figure it out." His voice was calm, too calm for someone his age. Later that evening, I found him scrolling on his phone, looking serious. I posted my bike. Online, he announced. I priced it a little lower than the others, so it sells fast. We can use the money to pay bills until you find something new. My heart sank. Caleb, no, you love that
bike.
You ride it every day after school. I'm not letting you sell it.
He
shrugged, his face too grown up for 13. It's just a bike. We can get another one later, right? You always tell me we don't lie to each other, Mom. So, I'm not going to pretend I don't see what's happening. We need money, and I can help. I hugged him so tight. He probably couldn't breathe, whispering, "I'll find something soon. I promise." But I wasn't so sure. It wasn't just the bills piling up that scared me. It was Walter, my 80-year-old grandfather, who raised me when my parents died in a car accident, lived in a care facility because of his Alzheimer's. I visited every week, though sometimes he barely remembered my name. Each visit hurt, but I never let it show because he had carried me through my darkest time, and I wasn't about to abandon him now. Walking home with Caleb that evening, I stared at the help wanted signs in store windows. None paid enough to cover both our rent and the care home fees. Caleb kept quiet for most of the walk, then said softly, "Mom, maybe we should move to a bigger city. There are more jobs there."
I sighed.
I've thought about it too, but what about Grandpa?
He's already so lost
in his own world. If we go, how will he feel when he realizes we don't visit as often? Caleb's lips pressed into a thin line. Sometimes he doesn't even remember we came. I stopped walking and looked at him sharply. "Don't talk like that about your great-grandfather. He raised me when I had no one else. We're not abandoning him." He nodded but said nothing more. His silence echoed my own hidden fear that staying was going to break us just as surely as leaving. That night, after Caleb fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the unpaid bills. For the first time in years, I felt the sting of hopelessness creep in. But deep down, I also knew something had to change. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the only sound is the hum of the old refrigerator, memories sneak in. Memories I thought I buried a long time ago. I married Caleb's father, Axon, when I was barely 21. He was a traveling stunt motorcyclist with a smile that could light up a stadium and a way of looking at you that made you feel like the only person in the world. For a while, I believed I was. We met at a local show his troupe performed when they stopped in Dayton. He invited me for coffee after the show, and 2 weeks later, we were inseparable. By the third week, he asked me to marry him. My grandfather, Walter, didn't approve. I remember him frowning, saying quietly, "Men like him, they don't settle." I brushed it off back then. I was young and too in love to see the warning signs. We got married quickly, and for a few months, it felt like a dream. Then the reality of his life hit me, touring city after city, constantly chasing adrenaline. Axon thrived on movement, on being the center of attention, while I stayed behind, trying to make a home out of a tiny rental apartment. When I found out I was pregnant with Caleb, I thought it would change things, that he'd slow down, come home more often, and realized we could be happy with something simple. He only stared at the pregnancy test, shrugged, and said, "Well, that's your call. You can come on tour or stay here. Up to you." I stayed. And when Caleb was born, I stayed alone. Axon sent money at first, called when he remembered, even mailed a few gifts. But as months turned into years, those calls became rare, and eventually they stopped altogether. One day, out of nowhere, one of his coworkers called me to apologize, to tell me Axon had been living with someone else for months, and often boasted that marriage had been a mistake he corrected early. I filed for divorce the next day. He didn't contest it, didn't even call to ask about Caleb. Since then, I built my world around my son and my grandfather. I didn't date. I didn't even think about it. My days revolved around work, homework, doctor visits for Walter, and bills. Life became predictable if lonely. Still, I told myself it was enough, that I didn't need anyone else, until that factory closed and forced me to face a terrifying truth. I had nothing left to fall back on, no husband, no family support. Besides Walter, who barely remembered me, and no safety net. Looking back, maybe I'd been standing still for too long, clinging to what little stability I had instead of reaching for something better. And now I had no choice but to step into the unknown. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Caleb stood by the stove, flipping them like a pro, humming a tune I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought this boy deserved so much more than this. He deserved a life that wasn't defined by overdue bills and a mother who came home too tired to talk. "Mom, look at this," he said, sliding his phone across the counter.
On the screen was a job posting.
Full-time housekeeper needed at a private estate near Lake Michigan. Housing included.
Competitive pay. I blinked.
Housekeeper? Yeah, it's perfect. You don't have to pay rent, and it's way better money than anything here. Plus, it's near the lake. You love the lake. He grinned like he had already solved all our problems. Caleb, I've never been a housekeeper. I wouldn't even know where to start.
It's cleaning, Mom.
You clean here all the time and you're good at it, and we can visit Grandpa twice a month. It's not that far. Besides, he hesitated before adding softly, I don't want to see you stress like this anymore. The words cut deep. I wanted to tell him we'd be fine, that something better would come along if we just waited. But the truth, waiting wasn't working anymore.
Are you
sure about this?
I asked.
He nodded. I'm serious. If you don't like it, we can always come back. But at least try. I can even switch to online school for now. My heart ached. This was my child. 13 years old, already talking about sacrificing for me, like he'd been doing his whole life. No, I said quickly. You're not giving up your school. We'll figure something out. That night, I filled out the online application. The next day, a woman named Sylvia, the estate manager, called and scheduled an interview. Her tone was brisk but kind. And when I explained I had a teenage son, she said, we can make arrangements for him to stay on the property. He can even help out part-time if he wants.
2
days later, we boarded a train. I packed only what we needed. Some clothes, Caleb's laptop, and my old guitar, the one my mother had given me when I was 15. It had been gathering dust for years, but something about taking it felt right. Before we left town, we stopped at Grandpa's care facility. He sat in his chair by the window, staring outside, a blanket wrapped around his thin shoulders. Grandpa, we're moving for work, I said softly, kneeling in front of him. But we'll visit. I promise. He blinked slowly, eyes focusing on me for just a moment. Sasha and little Jenna, he murmured, confusing me with someone else like he often did. My throat tightened. It's Elena, Grandpa. And this is Caleb. He smiled, faintly, reaching out to squeeze my hand. Be happy, sweetheart. We boarded the train, and as it pulled away, Caleb squeezed my shoulder. Mom, this is going to be good. I can feel it. I tried to smile. I wanted to believe him. I really did. The estate rose out of the trees like something out of a magazine. Sleek, modern lines blended with the charm of an old converted barn. The place had once been a farm, Sylvia told us on the ride from the train station, but it had been renovated into a creative retreat for its owner. The owner, she said, was Miles Hayes, a director famous for high-end music videos and commercials. I'd heard the name before, but never paid attention to celebrity news. Sylvia showed us to our quarters. A modest but comfortable two-room suite, tucked into one wing of the estate.
Caleb
Bounced onto the bed like a kid on vacation, his eyes wide. Mom, this place is insane. Look at the view. Through the window, Lake Michigan shimmered under a pale blue sky. For a moment, I thought, maybe this won't be so bad. Then Sylvia lowered her voice. One thing you should know, Miles can be intense. He's creative, brilliant, but moody.
Don't take it personally.
I nodded, unsure what that meant until I met him that evening. I had just finished dusting the main living area, a space twice the size of our old apartment, when I heard a voice behind me. You know that's an original piece, right? Not something from a discount store. I turned quickly, almost dropping a rag. A tall man with sharp blue eyes and perfectly styled dark hair stood there, leaning against the door frame. He looked younger than I expected, late 30s maybe, but carried himself like someone used to being obeyed. I'm sorry, I stammered. I was just being careful, he smirked. Careful is good. Criticism, however, is optional. It took me a second to realize what he meant until I saw the TV behind him playing one of his music videos. A brightly colored, over-the-top dance piece I'd accidentally muttered about earlier. Something like, who even watches this stuff anymore? Thinking I was alone. Aya, relax, he said, folding his arms. I've got professional
Critics for that.
but I have to admit, it's refreshing when the help weighs in. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. He raised an eyebrow. Miles's fine, and for the record, you clean well. Keep that up, and we'll get along. He walked out without another word, leaving me standing there embarrassed and irritated all at once. That evening, Caleb returned from exploring the property, his cheeks flushed from excitement. Mom, guess who I met?
Miles.
He's actually cool. He asked me what music I liked and said he might show me his studio. I blinked. The same Miles I met. Caleb
Grinned.
Maybe he just doesn't like grown-ups. Over the next few days, I focused on my work, laundry, dusting, learning which cleaning products went where. Miles rarely spoke to me, but when he did, it was with quick, sarcastic comments that left me unsure whether to laugh or roll my eyes.
Caleb,
On the other hand, seemed to have charmed him completely. They'd talk in the garden, or I'd see them at the piano. In the evening, Miles explaining chords while Caleb soaked it all in. I kept my distance, reminding myself I was here for one reason, a paycheck. But there were moments, like when I had passed Miles's office and hear a soft melody coming from his guitar, that made me wonder about the man behind the sarcasm. For someone so successful, he seemed lonely. And I knew loneliness better than I wanted to admit. Days at the estate settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I woke early, made coffee in a kitchen twice the size of my old apartment, and started my chores, polishing the grand windows, dusting shelves filled with books I wasn't sure anyone had read, and making sure the linen smelled like spring no matter what time of year it was. It was harder work than I expected, but there was something steadying about it. I didn't have to think about layoffs or unpaid bills. I just had to make things shine.
Caleb thrived.
He pitched in, helping the groundskeeper move supplies or running errands for Sylvia. In the evenings, he talked nonstop about Miles, who somehow seemed to have adopted him as a sort of unofficial apprentice. Mom, did you know he built a whole recording studio here? It's like legit pro level. He said I could watch him mix a track next week. I tried to smile, though part of me worried. Just don't bother him too much, okay? Caleb rolled his eyes. He invited
Me, Mom.
It was true. Miles had taken a liking to Caleb almost immediately, offering him little tasks, fetching cables, helping tune instruments, even letting him sit in during brainstorming sessions. Me, I mostly stayed out of Miles's way. He had a reputation for mood swings, and I'd seen glimpses of them. Days when he barely noticed me, except to mutter a sarcastic remark, and other days when he'd unexpectedly soften, asking if I needed anything or if Caleb was doing okay. One afternoon, I walked past his office and heard a sound that made me pause. Guitar string soft, melancholic. I peeked in. Miles sat hunched over an old acoustic guitar, playing something slow and haunting, nothing like the flashy pop songs I'd seen in his videos. His head was bowed, eyes closed, as if he were somewhere far away. When he noticed me, he stopped abruptly. Need something? I froze, embarrassed. No, sorry. I was just passing by. He nodded, face unreadable. Close the door on your way out.
I did.
But the sound of that song stayed with me all night. For the first time since we'd arrived, I felt something unexpected. Curiosity. There was more to Miles Hayes than the sharp-tonged boss, who made me blush in our first meeting. Beneath the polished exterior and expensive taste, there was sadness.
And
if I was honest, I understood it. After all, I'd been living with my own for years, covering it up with work and responsibility until there was nothing left of me outside being someone's mom or someone's employee. Caleb saw none of that. To him, this place was adventure, and Miles was someone worth admiring. Maybe he was right. Maybe we'd both misjudged what we were stepping into. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry in the staff room, Sylvia walked in with an envelope in her hand. Special delivery, she said, placing it on the counter with a little smile. Inside was a cream-colored card with embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to the 40th birthday celebration of Miles Hayes. The location, a high-end restaurant on the lakefront, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. Transportation provided. Dress code formal. I stared at it. Is this a mistake?
nope.
He told me to make sure you and Caleb got one, Sylvia said.
Consider it a perk of the job.
A perk or setup. The first thing I thought was, why me? Miles barely tolerated me on his best days. Sure, he liked Caleb, but me.
We
Spoke in short sentences and awkward silences. Why invite us to a room full of wealthy, polished people who had nothing in common with a housekeeper and her teenage son? That evening I told
Caleb.
His eyes lit up instantly. A party? That's awesome. I've never been to one of those fancy places before. I hesitated. I don't know, Caleb. It feels
Weird.
like maybe we'll stick out. So what? Who cares if we do?
Mom, come on.
This is a chance to have fun for once. He paused, then grinned mischievously. And I already have an idea for your gift to him. I raised an eyebrow. Gift? Yeah, you're going to sing for him. I blinked. Excuse me, you still have that guitar, right?
I've heard you play, Mom.
You're really good. Trust me, he'll love it. The thought of standing in front of strangers and singing made my stomach twist. Caleb, I haven't performed in
Years.
I can't just you can, he interrupted firmly.
Besides, it's
Personal. Everyone else will probably bring expensive wine or gadgets.
Yule.
Give him something real. He had that determined look that reminded me so much of my younger self before life had dulled the edges. The next day, Caleb somehow managed to get us formal clothes on loan from a local boutique. One night rental. he said proudly, holding up a sleek black dress for me and a crisp suit for himself. They look perfect, don't they? I laughed softly, shaking my head. How did I raise such a planner? I had to, Mom, he said with a shrug. You've been doing it alone for 13 years. Someone's got to have your back. His words hit me harder than I expected. The night before the party, I took my old guitar out of its case. My fingers stumbled over the chords at first, but muscle memory kicked in, pulling me back to evenings when music filled the air, and I still believed in dreams. Still, anxiety gnawed at me. What if he laughs? What if this is some twisted joke to embarrass me in front of his friends? But then I thought of Caleb, his belief, his pride, and decided, even if it was a joke at home, I had high in play. The night of the party felt unreal, like we had stepped into someone else's life. The restaurant sat right on the lakefront, its floor toweling windows, reflecting the city lights dancing over the water. A valet opened the door for us, as if we were celebrities. And Caleb grinned like he had been born for moments like this. Mom, you look amazing, he whispered as we walked through the entrance. For once, I almost believed him. The black dress fit better than I expected. Simple, but elegant, paired with the light makeup Sylvia had insisted on helping me with. Inside, I spotted Miles immediately. He was laughing with a group of well-dressed guests, his presence commanding without him even trying. When he saw us, his eyes flickered with something I couldn't read. Surprise, amusement. But then he smiled. Glad you made it, he said, almost warmly. The night flowed around me like I was in a dream. People toasted Miles, praising his career, his generosity, his impact on the industry. I stayed quiet, nibbling at hors d'oeuvres while Caleb chatted easily with strangers. Twice his age. Then came the moment I dreaded. Any final words before we cut the cake? Someone announced. Miles glanced at me. I believe our housekeeper has something prepared. My stomach dropped. He hadn't even asked. He just knew. I shot a look at Caleb, who grinned and held up my guitar, which he had somehow arranged to be delivered there. You'll be fine, Mom, he whispered, handing it to me. My hands trembled as I stepped up to the small stage. I had planned to sing a classic birthday tune, quick and safe. But when my fingers touched the strings, something different came out. A melody I hadn't played in years. It was her song, my mother's song. The one she used to play on quiet evenings before the accident took her and my father away. I had learned guitar because of that song. And for some reason, tonight my hands chose it on their own. The room fell silent as I sang, my voice unsteady at first, then stronger as the words carried me back in time, back to safety, to love, to everything I thought I had lost. When the last chord faded, I realized I had closed my eyes. Opening them, I saw something I hadn't expected. People standing clapping, some even wiping their eyes. Caleb beamed, clapping the hardest, his chest puffed with pride. But Miles wasn't there. His chair sat empty. Confused, I stepped down, handing the guitar back to Caleb. Where did he go? Caleb shrugged, but there was a trace of concern on his face. I don't know. He left during the song. For the rest of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Did I do something wrong? Did the song upset him? Or had I embarrassed him in front of his elite friends? The next few days were quiet. Miles barely appeared around the house, and when he did, he seemed distracted, almost distant. I told myself not to care. He was my boss, not my friend. But late at night, lying awake in that beautiful room, I couldn't help wondering why my song had made him leave. I didn't know it yet, but that song had stirred something in him, something buried for decades, and it was about to change all of our lives. 3 days passed before Miles finally approached me. I was out in the garden trimming roses like Sylvia had shown me when his voice startled me from behind. That song you played, he said quietly. Where did you learn it? I turned, surprised by his tone. It was softer than I had ever heard from him. My mom taught it to me when I was a teenager. She used to sing it to me at night. Before the accident, his eyes darkened. Your mom? What was her name?
Nora.
Carter. He froze like I'd hit him.
Nora.
Carter? He repeated almost to himself. Then he looked at me, his usual confidence gone, replaced by something
Raw.
Elena, I need to tell you something. We sat on the patio as he explained. When he was about 7 or 8, he said a couple had approached him while he was playing outside.
The
woman had cried when she hugged him, whispering something about finally finding you. She sang to him softly, a tune he never forgot, though he hadn't heard it since. It was the same song.
My
skin prickled. Miles, are you saying you think that woman was my mom?
He
nodded slowly. I never told anyone because I didn't understand what it meant. And my mother? Well, the woman who raised me, she said they were just strangers. She was protective, and I believed her. He ran a hand through his hair, looking shaken. But when you played that song, I knew it wasn't just familiar. It felt like home. I could barely breathe. Miles, I had an older brother, but my parents were told he died at birth. They said there were complications, and my voice broke.
Are
you saying you might be him? His hands gripped the edge of the table. I don't know, but I need to find out. That evening, we visited Walter together. My grandfather sat by the window, staring at the autumn leaves outside. I knelt next to him. Grandpa, it's me, Elena. And this is Miles. Do you remember him? For a long moment, nothing. Then Walter's gaze sharpened, and his hand trembled as he reached toward Miles. Jenna. Miles froze. What? Walter's voice cracked. My boy, my grandson. Tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time in months, he seemed fully aware. They told us you were gone, but I knew something wasn't right. I gripped Miles's arms, stunned. Grandpa, you sure? Walter nodded weakly, his old eyes never leaving Miles. The eyes, those Carter eyes, and that song.
Nora
sang it for both of you. Miles's chest rose and fell as if he couldn't get enough air. All these years, I thought I didn't belong anywhere, and I had a family. I had you. I felt tears streaming down my own face.
You're my
brother. He turned to me, his expression breaking into something between disbelief and relief. Yeah, it looks like I am. For the next hour, we stayed with Walter, letting him ramble about
the past.
He spoke of my parents' grief after losing their firstborn son and how they never fully recovered. Hearing it all felt like someone had opened a door I didn't even know existed in my life. When we left, Miles insisted on driving straight to the facilities administration to move Walter into private care at the estate. He deserves better than this, Miles said firmly.
If
I'm really family, I'm going to act like it. Over the next weeks, everything changed. Walter was relocated into a comfortable private suite with round-the-clock nurses Miles personally hired. His moments of clarity became more frequent, and whenever they faded, he seemed calmer, safer. Miles and Caleb grew inseparable. Caleb spent hours in the studio, learning chords and digital editing from Miles, who joked that he had finally found a student worth teaching. In the evenings, the three of us would sit together talking about nothing and everything at once. Family, music, dreams. One night, Miles pulled me aside. You don't work for me anymore, he said. I blinked. What? You're my sister, Elena. You don't answer to me. You work with me now. I want you to do what you love. That song you played, you have talent. Use it. I laughed through tears. I haven't performed in years. Then start small. Teach kids. Make music again. Whatever you want. Just don't bury yourself like I did. It hit me then how much he had been carrying. Years of loneliness and ambition masking the pain of never knowing where he came from. And now suddenly we both had a family again. And when we thought we'd lost forever, life settled into a rhythm again. But it wasn't like the one I had before. This time it was fuller, warmer. Walter's new suite at the estate had a big bay window that overlooked the gardens.
Sometimes,
When he was lucid, he'd sit there holding a cup of tea and humming the very same song my mother used to sing. When the confusion came back, he didn't panic like before. Instead, he seemed calmer, almost peaceful, surrounded by family instead of sterile white walls. Miles took to visiting him every evening, sometimes reading old letters aloud or playing guitar softly by his bedside. Seeing him there, this man who once seemed so sharp-edged and untouchable, soften into the role of a grandson, filled something in me I didn't know was empty. One evening, Miles surprised me with a question. What would you think about using the old barn near the lake as a music space?
not. For me,
For you? I blinked. For me? You told me you used to teach yourself on that guitar. You could teach other kids. Caleb told me you used to dream about it. I looked at my son, who was grinning sheepishly from across the room. Did you tell him everything about me? Caleb shrugged. Pretty much. He's family.
now.
No secrets.
Miles laughed.
And for a moment it felt like we had always been this way. Siblings sharing plans, teasing, helping each other heal from things we didn't even know were broken. The barn was renovated within weeks. Fresh paint, polished floors, and a small stage with proper sound equipment Miles insisted on installing. On opening day, Caleb stood beside me, proudly holding up a little sign he'd made. Carter Music Academy. At first, just a handful of neighborhood kids came to learn, but soon word spread. Kids from nearby towns showed up.
Some shy.
Some brimming with talent. All of them hungry for a place to belong. I taught them not just chords and notes, but how music could hold your heart together when everything else felt like it was falling apart. Miles was there for almost every session. Sometimes giving pointers, sometimes just sitting back, watching. And Caleb had found his own calling. He started producing simple beats, learning digital, mixing for Miles, and slowly building a portfolio of his own. One evening after class, we gathered in Walter's suite. He was lucid that night, smiling softly as he held Caleb's hand. You've grown so much, just like your mom did, he said, his voice
Trembling.
Then he looked at Miles and me. You found each other again.
That's
What matters. Family finds a way. I could feel tears sliding down my cheeks. Miles reached for my hand, his eyes bright but steady. Yeah, Grandpa, he whispered. Family finds a way. Then, almost instinctively, Miles handed me my guitar. Play it, he said quietly. The song. I hesitated, then nodded.
my
Fingers found the chords easily, like they were always waiting. Caleb hummed along at first, then began to sing, his voice clear and strong. Miles tapped a rhythm on the arm of Walter's chair, and soon all three generations were bound by one simple melody. A melody that had started as my mother's lullaby and somehow carried us all back to each other. When the last note faded, Walter wiped his eyes and smiled. Perfect, he whispered. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch and looked out at the lake. Months ago, I had felt lost, desperate, certain my life had narrowed to bills and exhaustion. But then came one unexpected job offer. One sarcastic boss with blue eyes like my grandfather's, and one song I hadn't played in years. I had left home searching for a paycheck and found something far greater, a brother, a renewed sense of purpose, and a reminder that family isn't just who you're born with. It's who you fight to keep, even when you think they're gone. And as I closed my eyes, I could almost hear my mother's voice in the wind singing softly, like she was there with us all along.